in on our bread and butter, which is wrestling, cross country, and track and field. And like a lot of media sources give power fives, power fours the shine. And there's a lot of programs and coaches and athletes out there that are doing a lot of great things. And so we want to give them that shine with our own platform, but then also we're just trying to create conversations for our younger self because we feel like maybe, we missed out on some things when we were going through the recruiting process. So we're really just trying to get the word out to student athletes that are, in the process of going through that, looking for a college, maybe having a tough time, maybe not knowing what they want. Along the way, because of our Jersey roots, we've tapped into a lot of our connections with New Jersey high school wrestling. And so we have coached before, but we're not coaching now. And this is our best way to help grow the sport and promote the sport. And you got something great going on, and we want to do our part to help you get the word out, grow the sport a little bit more. But also, we've been following it, and we want to talk to you personally to get the inside scoop about everything that's going on as well. Ladies and gentlemen, howdy and aloha. We are back. We are here. You are there. You know what time it is. We are grateful for you to join us this evening for another amazing episode of Airey Bros Radio. But before we get rolling, smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Every sub helps us shine more light on the programs, people, and platforms that are changing the game. Drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from and who you want to hear next. Follow us on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts at Airey Bros Radio. As always, this episode is powered by CS Instant Coffee and Black Sheep Endurance, where all your endurance and nutrition needs. Let's not forget about what we're doing over here at Airey Bros Radio. We're shining a spotlight on coaches, athletes, and innovators who are doing it right, especially the ones building something from the ground up. Tonight, we're going belly to belly with Tom Houck, president and co-founder of CLAW Wrestling. The man leading the charge behind the Champions League of Americans Wrestling, the boldest pro wrestling innovating the sport has ever seen. Tom is on a mission to give wrestling a professional league it's always deserved, with real athletes, real teams, and real stakes. CLAW Wrestling is launching their pro league in 2025 with their draft coming up in July in Atlantic City. They were also the sponsor title of the 2025 USA Wrestling US Open. They are innovating rules to increase scoring and fan engagement and action, building a true team-based league with live draft playoffs, team brands, and fantasy sports. Without further ado, we are honored to have you with us, and we greatly appreciate your time. Tom Houck, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys, again. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. We're glad we can connect with you. And before we get rolling, we know you got a lot of great things going on. So anywhere you want us to direct the fans, anything on social media, any outlets, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you got going on, website, the floor is yours.
All of our social media platforms are CLAW_wrestling. And you usually see our little red part of our logo. That kind of looks like a diagonal wrestling mat, CLAW_wrestling. And that's X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. And then on our website is wrestleclaw.com, one word.
Okay, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes for you as well. And anyone wants to check out what they got going on, like I said, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but they do have a draft coming up, so you're going to want to tune in for that. Tom, the way we like to kick things off here, we all have our origin story to the sport, how we got involved with it, what we're doing in our part to grow the sport, to change the sport, to help the sport. So I see you got a Mountaineer Wrestling shirt on. What is your origin story?
Well, I'm from Pennsylvania originally,
okay.
But the West Virginia Mountaineers and Coach Tim Flynn have been greatly supportive of CLAW. So we give shout outs to the programs that support us whenever we can. But I grew up in Pennsylvania, started wrestling in fourth grade, wrestled through in-state college, where Penn State is, wrestled up through high school, was a state qualifier in high school in Pennsylvania. Back then it was single elimination, so lost in the first round at states. And that's a whole different story, but learned a huge life lesson from that, like so many people do from wrestling. And then I did wrestle at Penn State for a short while, like a year and a half, I was not an accomplished college wrestler. I had one Division I win, which I'm very proud of. My record was 1-2. But my co-founder, Eric Brugel, had over 100 wins for Penn State and was an All-American there. So I like to say we had over 100 wins at Penn State and not tell people that he had all of them except one.
That's awesome. Did you wrestle for Coach Fritz or Coach Lorenzo? Who was your coach when you were there?
Yes, yes, they were both my coaches. So it was
Okay.
early 80s. And then interestingly, I kind of, I was done with wrestling when I dropped out in college, moved to Washington, D.C., where basically there was no media coverage of wrestling. The internet wasn't here yet. And except for like amateur wrestling news, magazine, there
Hmm.
was really no way to even follow it. And so I kind of disappeared from the sport for a long time until I was married and had kids and got them into wrestling and then got back in later in my adult life.
Okay. Are there, did the children, did your kids, did they go through the middle school, high school, all that stuff?
Sort of, they weren't as serious as I was when I was a kid. And, it's definitely not a sport for everybody. My one son tried it and really didn't like it at all. And the other one lasted a little longer and actually could have been pretty good, but he liked hockey and wanted to focus on that. So, yeah. But because of them, I got back involved in wrestling, and that sort of started, chapter 2 of the wrestling story for me, which ultimately led to CLAW.
So speaking about chapter 2, maybe on chapter 3, what led you to Claw? Where'd that idea come from?
Well, about 3 years ago, I was invited to be part of a group that was exploring starting a professional league. And so my background sort of in that chapter 2, in 2014, I started a independent wrestling facility in Northern Virginia called Top of the Podium. And we started with 5,000 square feet, moved to a 20,000 square foot facility. And it was amazing. It was an independent center for the community and in an area where wrestling was not big. It was Northern Virginia. I had, when my kids were little, other families, you'd talk to other parents, they didn't even know wrestling existed. They didn't even know it was an option for their kid. So it wasn't really on the radar at all. There were some local clubs. It's basically, fathers who wrestled, got their kids to wrestle, and that was it. And I became convinced, I knew wrestling was a great sport. I knew it was valuable for kids and really wanted to elevate it in our area. And that started with a much better facility because kids would have to go to the high school wrestling rooms after high school practice. It was like 100 degrees in there. There's no room for the parents. It wasn't a way to bring people into the sport. And so Top of the Podium was very nice. It was high tech. Like I said, the first one was 5,000 square feet, but the next one was 20,000. And we had 5 full mats on the main floor, high tech TVs, speaker system everywhere. We had a wrestling room upstairs. We had a 37-seat movie theater. We had a retail wrestling store. It sold, shoes, gear, headgear, anything you would need. VIP boxes. There's lots of seating and bleachers and eating areas, strength and conditioning. So it was an incredible place. And it was really there that a lot of the foundation for CLAW happened. And specifically, it was sort of an innovation. So we knew we had to grow wrestling, if this was going to make it. It wasn't related to a specific club or anything, just anybody could come. And we knew we had to grow wrestling. So I went to dozens and dozens of schools, visiting schools, talking about wrestling. And then we'd have these introduction to wrestling clinics at Top of the Podium that were free clinics for the community. And families would come in and their kids would do a 2-hour introduction to wrestling clinic. And you'd talk to parents who didn't know anything about wrestling or had misconceptions. So it was the market research that ultimately led to some of the decisions at CLAW. Because if you look at past efforts to professionalize wrestling, pretty much all efforts, it's usually been done by wrestling people, by coaches or great wrestlers. And sort of the prevailing mindset is wrestling is great if just more people knew about it and, maybe produce it better, it will take off. And we do not believe that is the case. When you get outside of the bubble of wrestling and talk to people who don't watch it and don't follow it, sometimes even people who wrestled in the past and they don't watch it now because the numbers, there's a core audience for wrestling, but it's not huge. It's a couple 100,000 people, which is, tiny in the scheme of the world. And, a lot of people think it's boring, and a lot of people don't understand it, and it's slow. And some of the most hyped matches, like, I don't know if you guys saw Starachi wrestle Dake this past weekend, but the first 5.5 minutes, it's like, this is boring. It's boring because they're so good and their defense is so good. It's just hard to score. And then the last 30 seconds became exciting. But, if you're showing that to a new person who's never watched it before, they're bored. And so talking to these people was invaluable, and learning how to talk to them and what resonates with them, and, how to say things, how to market it. I mean, here's a perfect example. At middle schools, I'd go in and quickly learned that singlets were a problem.
Yep.
And we were trying to start teams at their schools. So I would hold up a singlet and say, here's your uniform if you join wrestling. And they're like, seriously? It's like a onesie, a leotard. Those are the most common. I mean, think about what people think about a football uniform, for example. And in wrestling, they're calling it a onesie and a leotard. And I'd say, just kidding. Here's your uniform in our league. And I'd hold up compression shirt and fight shorts that were really cool. And like almost literally, you'd get a standing ovation. Let's go. The reaction completely different. Well, if you talk to wrestling people, why would you not have singlets? You got to have singlets. And it's like, I understand wrestlers prefer to wear singlets once they're used to the sport. But if you're talking to non-wrestling people, they think it's awkward. They think it's weird. No, not everybody, but a lot of people. So we are using so we just said, we've got to challenge everything about this sport and use this knowledge that we've gained from, really market research, if we're going to grow wrestling and take it to higher levels. And so when I joined this group 3 years ago, I said, I was very grateful that they invited me, but I said, I just have two conditions, if I'm going to spend a lot of time on this and, sort of pour my energies into it. One, we have to challenge all assumptions about the sport. And two, we have to think out of the box and innovate and think differently. It's the only way we're going to grow. If we do what's been done before, and it's been done numerous times and continues to be done, it's not something I want to be involved with. That's not exciting. And I don't think it's not something I want to invest in. And I don't think there's much potential for it. So, when you say challenge assumptions, be open-minded, everybody always says, yes, of course. But then when you start getting to real decisions, sometimes well, we can't do that. In this case, there's a couple core things that we couldn't really see eye to eye on. The big thing was the rules. They wanted freestyle, and we felt like freestyle wasn't the answer to growing the sport, especially in America. And so we sort of split off, and it was all amicable, great people. We keep in touch. They're helping us now. So all that's good. But, they sort of gave our blessing and said, do what you want to do. Try it your way. So for almost 3 years, because you got to start with the core product. Right? We can market better. We can communicate better to non-wrestling people. We can wear different uniforms. We can structure a league differently. We do have to challenge all that. But if the core product, is sort of flawed and people think it's boring, and some people do, I love to watch wrestling, but I understand, that the audience that we need to reach if we want to grow, doesn't yet. And so we have to address the core product. Otherwise, you're just putting lipstick on a pig. We have to make changes, and especially with trends in sports today, short form content, shorter attention spans. People, every league's looking like, how do we speed it up? How do we have more scoring? How do we more action? How do we engage fans more? And so we knew we had to address the core product. And that led to a long process of rethinking rules and reimagining what a wrestling match can look like. We wanted it to look like, it had to look like real wrestling. We didn't want wrestlers to have to learn a new sport, but we had to make sort of structural changes in the match and have new ways to score and more incentives to score, to pick up the pace. And we've tested it a lot at numerous universities in their wrestling rooms. We've done 3 public events live where we've done rules. We've done like 125 matches with D1 and senior level wrestlers. and got their feedback, got the fans' feedback. We approach it like a business, right? We don't assume because we like something, takedown should be 3 points because that's right. It doesn't matter what I think. We're surveying fans, we're doing market research, we're talking to athletes, but really fans are the most important as long as it doesn't impact safety or anything. And so we come up with a rule set that we think is great. It's way more scoring. It's way faster pace. Just talking to Shane Sparks earlier today, and he's like, it's hard to broadcast because I got to be on my toes every second. There's so much action. In a typical folk style or even freestyle match, it's like I got to have a lot of background material to talk about when nothing's happening. Where they're from, and in CLAW, it's boom, boom, boom. So that's kind of that's a long answer to your short question, but that was kind of how we went from top of the podium to being part of this group, to getting excited about, if we run this as a business and think out of the box, maybe we'll be the first ones to finally, solve this riddle, to how to take wrestling to the masses.
Well, we definitely want to get into that rule set and break that down, but you talked about that impressive wrestling club. I believe it was top of the podium. And then you brought up market research and doing 3 years of kind of the groundwork. I'm interested in knowing, what is your professional background?
So I graduated in accounting from Penn State and was a CPA, and worked at KPMG Pete Marwick for 7 years. One of the biggest accounting firms in the world, still is KPMG. Most people know it because some golfers, have it on their hat or whatever. But was at KPMG, ended up being an audit manager there. Then I started my own business when I was 29. It was a consulting and training firm related to accounting and auditing, and sold that 10 years later to a big financial company called Thomson Reuters, which a lot of people have heard of, and basically was able to retire when I was 39. The common thread and all that, and it relates to top of the podium and CLAW. My forte has always kind of been out of the box thinking and challenging assumptions. At my company, our slogan underneath our logo was "Challenge all assumptions." That's how we helped our clients. It's hard to do. It's people assume things all the time and just automatically think you have to do things certain way. So there's processes to help you identify assumptions and then to challenge them and to brainstorm and to come up with new ideas. So that was kind of my background. I then went into ministry. I got a master's in theology and was involved in some various ministry entrepreneurial stuff. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. And none of that was huge, incremental to modest success. The goal in ministries, different than a for-profit entity. But then my kids got involved in wrestling, and then I kind of, jumped into wrestling. Wrestling deserves something better than Northern Virginia, and that's when Top of the Podium started in 2014.
Awesome.
So, it's funny you mentioned the singlets as such a barrier to entry for so many people. As I mentioned, I'm down here in South Carolina, but I moved here originally in 2022 to take over a wrestling team and rebuild the wrestling program. And I can't tell you how many kids just flat out said no because they said, "Do we have to wear those singlet things?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "No, I'm not going to do it." And now I'm back coaching cross country again. And I'm recruiting soccer players because soccer is in the spring down here. So I'm like, "Hey, I can get you in shape in the fall." And their biggest concern is the shorts. Do we have to wear those short shorts? And do we have to wear those skinny tank tops? I'm like, man, it's crazy how it's just such that certain things are such barrier to entries to young people. But I could see how changing the singlet is such an important thing. And we get to see it a little bit with some of the colleges when they do it here or there. But that's for the purists, boy, they get heated about that topic.
We get mocked a lot for using two-piece uniforms. The other thing we want to do is you can wear your favorite wrestler's jersey, to work or to school, and you're not going to wear a singlet there, right? No. So the athletes will have their name on the back with a number of their choice. It's not necessarily their weight class. It might, maybe their favorite number when they were a kid was 12, and they get to bring that back and put it on the back of their jersey. So some of the athletes think that's really cool. But yeah, the whole idea is we want the uniforms to look cool. We want kids to want to wear them and think they're cool. and people to be able to buy merch, because merch is part of the strategy there,
Absolutely.
to make it work.
Absolutely. I also want to congratulate you for being able to retire at 39. That's pretty amazing. I'm curious, from the time you stepped off the mat at Penn State to when you got back into it, when your son got into it, was wrestling something that you kept on your radar?
Honestly, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was done with it, my whole life kind of as a kid was wrestling. And when I was done, I was done. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. from Pennsylvania, and, was really into my business career and started in the business. Like I said, it was hard to follow, until the internet. It was practically impossible. So I think when I went home to my parents, we went to a couple of dual meets, over the years. Yeah, but wasn't really into it. Just no interest. In fact, Eric Brugel, the co-founder, would often try to talk to me about wrestling, and he wanted me to coach down in Virginia, and I had zero interest. So, in some sense, I'm kind of embarrassed by that, because I kind of pushed it away for a while. But it was kind of, young adult thing. I had different interests and different priorities. But then the kids got me back into it, and then it was full bore again.
Well, we're glad the kids got you back into it, and I think that's the MO for a lot of wrestlers. I think there's a good population that get into coaching in some way, shape, or form, but I think maybe for a lot of maybe their career didn't go the way they wanted, or that last match didn't go the way they wanted, and they, you know, maybe not literally, but they leave their shoes on the mat and they never look back. And that's something I think with what you're doing in terms of getting those people also back into the sport. It took me a while. Jimmy had put it off to the side for a little bit, and I kept trying to drag him in with the Flow account, like, hey, this match is on, this match is on. And then we were living out in Denver, and I started dragging him to some University of Northern Colorado matches, and then lo and behold, we got him back.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you talk about kind of full bore once your kids got into it, and then with the club and now CLAW. And I think the conversation with what can we do to grow the sport has always been, how do we make it more exciting? And you brought up that rule set. So let's get into it. Let's dive into that rule set and the team concept.
All right. Well, all our rules, so actually backing up, the first thing we did before we talked about any rules was we spent a lot of time studying fan psychology and what do fans want to see in spectator sports? What do they like? What do they dislike? What bores them? What confuses them? And we looked at a variety of different sports and learned as much as we can. It kind of came up with this list of factors that every decision that we made about rules, we sort of looked over at that list to see if it addressed some of those things. So to give you an example, just one quick example, like football and baseball, football obviously is hugely popular. So maybe it's not the greatest example, but it's fragmented action, which means, there's stopping and starting after each play. And there's situational diversity. These were two phrases that we talked about a lot. Situational diversity means it's not just the same thing over and over and over. So, 1st and 10 from your 20 is different than, 3rd and 2 in the red zone. And 3rd and 2 in the red zone is different with 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, versus, the first half. Every kind of situation is different. 2nd and 1 is different than 2nd and 15. And the same with baseball. Runners on 2nd and 3rd with 1 out is different than, bases loaded and nobody out. And what inning you're in matters. And so baseball, I love baseball. Unfortunately, I'm a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, and it's painful, but I still watch them and I love it. And a lot of it is because of the situational diversity. If you're really into the sport, every situation is different, and it's not just the same thing over and over. Compare that to something like, and I know people who do these sports will say, hey, it's more complicated than this, Tom. But soccer, lacrosse, hockey, to a lay person who doesn't, really follow the sport and hasn't done it like me, to me, it just looks like the same thing over and over. You might have a power play in hockey, so that might be complete ignorance on my part, but I'm not the only ignorant sports fan out there, right? It just kind of volleyball. So a lot of sports, and those are continuous action, right? There's no pause to stop and to think and to strategize. So we said, how can we get more of that into wrestling? And like Monday morning quarterback is related to that. You kick the field goal on 4th and 1, or you go for it, or should you have punted? You listen to talk radio after a football game, and every expert in the world everybody thinks they're smarter than the coach, right? And they're calling in and complaining about the call. They did this wrong. They took out the relief pitcher too early. They should have kept them in. Why did they try to steal that base? Well, it's endless. So how do we get more of that in wrestling? How do we get more Monday morning quarterback? How can we get more strategy where people can question things? So that led to some of our rule changes. So I digress a bit, but we had all these factors of things that fans like. They like drama and close matches as opposed to blowouts. They like this, they like that, they don't like this. And then we looked at the rest. So we have that sort of background. And then we looked at wrestling and we said, we're in America. Folk style is definitely more popular in America. And so we're going to start with folk style. But we know there's things about freestyle that people like. There's things about folk style that people like and things that they don't like. And the same with freestyle. But folk style is going to kind of be our basis to start. And so what do people like about folk style? We want more of that. What do people don't like? We want less of that. And then the same with freestyle. And so we sort of merged them in together, this hybrid of folk style and freestyle. And we said, is this good enough? Is this a product that will really help us grow this sport? And we said, no, we don't think it is. We got to be more aggressive. We got to think more out of the box. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, like with some of these high level matches, like Lee Ono a couple months ago, sort of the same thing. You got these greatly hyped matches. That's when new people are going to watch, right? This is a big match. And then it's so hard to score. Nothing happens and it's boring. So it's like we need more incentives to score and we need more ways to score. Well, how do you have more ways to score? But we brainstormed a lot and tested a lot of things. But one of them was like, and this is more incentive, the quick score bonus. If you score in the first 10 seconds of any, we call them rounds. We do a lot of things to make it more familiar with MMA people. And so we call them rounds instead of periods. But if you score in the first 10 seconds of any round, you get an extra point. So an escape, you get out, it's 2 points. All of a sudden, mat wrestling has completely changed. Because, if you watch like college wrestling, they brace, they slowly quad pod up. There's not a big urgency to get out. You take it, kind of taking your time, being safe. And now if you get a 2-point escape, it's like, boom. Some of these guys are like rocket ships right on the whistle. Action. We want to encourage action. The pylon is probably the most unique and innovative and talked about rule change that we have. So there's 3 orange pylons around the mat, on the perimeter of the mat. And if either wrestler knocks it down, they get a point. Mat wrestling only, not neutral. And this kind of came from somebody in our research as we talked to people and talked to fans, said it would be nice if there was another way for the bottom person to score besides just an escape or a reversal. And we're like, okay, cool, but how? Like, you don't get broken down, you get a point or something? Like, that didn't seem to make any sense. Separate conversation, we're talking about like push-outs from neutral. And, sometimes you'll see, you can push the guy out of bounds, get him to step out of bounds and you get a point. We're like, well, could there be something like that for mat wrestling? And then it's like, okay, well, if you get the guy out of bounds, you get a point. And we're like, maybe it's too easy just to sort of drag the guy over and hold onto his leg and pull him out of bounds, or lift him up like in a mat return position, just take him out of bounds. That didn't seem right. And I was watching an NFL game one day, and there's a play at the end zone, and the running back lunges for the corner of the end zone and hits the pylon. And I'm like, that's it, pylons. And so we started experimenting with them. And because the original idea was, okay, if the bottom person can get out of bounds, they get a point. So the top person really has to control them. Like, are you really controlling somebody if they can go wherever they want? And we say the answer is no. If I'm a bad guy and you're a good guy and there's a gun over there on the floor, the first person that gets it, is going to have a huge advantage in this struggle, I need to control you so you can't get it. And so, but when you had the whole mat to work with, it was like it was too easy for the bottom person. So that's what pylons are like. Okay, there's just 3 spots on the mat. And if the bottom person, originally it was just the bottom person. The bottom person can get to it and knock it down first. They get a point. And so we've experimented with this a lot, and it's kind of radical. The purists are completely against it. This is a carnival. This is goofy. This is gimmicky. I'd say the most common reaction, if they haven't seen it, is skeptical. Like you're going to put orange pylons around the mat. But so many people, after they see it, and we've surveyed the fans, wrestling fans, non-wrestling fans, it's their favorite. Non-wrestling fans, it's absolutely their favorite thing. And wrestling fans like it too, because it completely revolutionizes mat wrestling. So you think if we're wrestling and I'm on top and I got a claw ride or something, or I'm throwing in legs, that's what people think can be boring about folk style, right? It's somebody's just riding. Now we call stalling quicker, and you got to be working to turn and all that. But still, it can be boring sometimes, mat wrestling. But now, anytime they're near a pylon, there's a point in play. And you'll hear fans yelling, hit the pylon, and you can kick it with your foot. You can swipe it with your hand. We had a guy hit it with his head once because his arms were tied up. And it's just so much more entertaining and so much more fun to watch. We found, and this is why you have to test rules, which the NCAA did not do when it made some of its rule changes in recent years. It's just gut feel from coaches who wanted like 3-point takedowns. It's actually caused less action when you look at the stats and more stalling. But never mind that right now. You got to test the rules. And we kept testing with pylons. We went from 4 pylons to 2 to 3 to position them at different places. But eventually we found out the bottom person had this big advantage, because if they could get to a pylon in 10 seconds, they got 2 points for the pylon and the quick score bonus. And then if they could escape, and our second and third rounds are only 60 seconds, they're up 3-0 in this round. And you got to win the rounds in CLAW. Person who wins the most rounds wins the match, unless you pin them or get a tech. And so they basically won the round. And the bottom guys are just taking off, like a baby crawling to the pylons. And so we made it the top person can get it or the bottom person can get it. And that's really neutralized things. And so now, the bottom person's in not such a hurry to get there. But it takes control to a new level. It takes mat awareness to a new level. You always have to know where those pylons are on the mat. And it's body awareness too, because we've seen guys kick it with their foot. It's really interesting when you watch what the guys are doing as they've adapted to the rules. So sorry, that's just one example of a new way to score. A new way to score points, and the quick score bonus is an incentive, to score points. So that's an example of each of those. But we ended up with 12 ways to score, which sounds like a lot at first. There's this balance. If there's not very many ways to score, it can be boring. If there's too many ways to score, it's too complex and confusing for fans. So you're trying to find that sweet spot. And once you find it, it's important how the announcers describe it and explain it and reinforce it. And the graphics are important. Like you got to think about everything, to help fans digest and learn it quickly. And so we have 12 ways to score, but we've broken it down into there's 3 ways to score on top, there's 3 on bottom, there's 3 from neutral, and then there's 3 miscellaneous ways. And then when you put them in those buckets and just kind of focus on that during the action, it's much easier to understand. We have graphics, our announcers are trained, so to make everybody understand. But because there's more ways to score, there's a lot more action and a lot more excitement.
So there's a lot.
And just cut me off if my answers are too long.
No, we don't do that over here. We like to let our guests talk, and we like to listen. That's part of having a great conversation, is being able to listen and digest everything. But you did give us a lot to unpack. So you said there's 12 ways to score. You mentioned that you're doing rounds instead of periods. Is it going to be, I'm assuming you mentioned a 2-minute second and third period, so it's 3 rounds. How long is the first round?
It's actually 4 rounds,
and
the match is 5 minutes total. So we want it to be more of a sprint and less of a marathon. And because you have to win the rounds, each round is sort of like a mini bout. And you can't wait to the end of the match, can't keep it close, try to win at the end, which you so often see, in big matches. The first round's 90 seconds, and then 60, 60, and then 90 again at the end for a total of 5 minutes. If they do go into overtime, like the rounds are tied, 1-1 or 2-2, it's a 60-second sudden victory. The size of the mat is shrunk. We actually have a square mat to make it distinctive. It makes more area to wrestle, and you always know it's CLAW. But for overtime, with push-outs like in freestyle, but in overtime, there's a red square in the center, and that becomes the wrestling area. So it's much smaller. It's much more like sumo. So you can get the push-out, but 60 seconds max, and you start in an over-under body lock, sort of the clinch like they used to do. Mm-hmm. But there's differences, which we just wanted to make it exciting and swift and decisive, not some long drawn-out overtime thing, which you still, they've improved the rules in college, but it still, can go on for a while.
Yeah. Square mat, you must have broken some of the purest brain with that one.
The singlets is by far the most thing that we're ripped on for, and the pylons. The purist and people who won't even give it a chance just make fun of the pylons and say it's goofy and silly and all that. But I have one D1 coach who told me he was very skeptical of pylons, and after he saw it, he came up to me and he said, "Now I'm a believer," and I'm like, "That's awesome." So, there'll still always be people who don't like something. There's people in baseball who don't like the pitch clock. You don't like the extra inning rule, putting the guy on second base. But that's okay. For every wrestling fan we lose because they're, a traditionalist or purist or just don't like it, we're going to gain 10 new fans who love this, because I guarantee you the new people, because we've written surveys after our events. Every single new person says the pylons are their favorite thing. So yeah, the square mat, the 5-minute, and the other thing I'll mention real quick is, because everything is designed to encourage action and urgency. So we modified an old Wade Chalice idea, which he calls a point scored as a point earned. And he's proposed this for college for, I think, decades. But every point you score goes to your team. So you win 9-3, you get 6 points. And this is another example of top of the podium. Wade's talked about that a lot. I don't know if it's ever been tried, but we did try it at top of the podium. We did middle school dual meets with that system in place, and we learned stuff, and we learned we needed to make some modifications, to make it work. So in CLAW, you get 5 points for winning your match. If you win, you get 5 points, and then you get your margin of victory. So if you win 9-3, you're going to get 6 more points, 5 for winning plus 6. So you get 11 points for your team. And if you get a pin, you get a pin, or a forfeit is 25 points. But again, that was experimenting and testing to kind of come up with the right recipe there. But it's awesome, because every point, and you never know in a dual meet if you're going to need those points or not. So, if you're winning 9-2, there's still an incentive to score. And if you're losing, there's an incentive to try to narrow the gap. And so every rule we have is, how does this increase action? How does this increase urgency? How does this increase scoring? How do we allow for more Monday morning quarterbacking? How do we ensure closer matches while still keeping it fair? And those are all things I could talk about too, but I don't want to. I'll let you guys ask more questions.
Well, so we got the rule set, we got the action, we got a draft coming up. How is the draft going to work out? And I know we have one of our former guests is a general manager, and Caden Henschel. How is that all going to work? And it's teams. So is it going to be dual meets? Are they going to be on locations? Are they going to be home matches? Is it going to be maybe like a quad or a tournament, style where all the teams come together for like a winner take all?
Yep. So the draft is July 21st in Atlantic City, at Harrah's Atlantic City. It's at a big youth tournament called New Way Summer Nationals. Yes, Jersey. So we're expecting about 2,000 wrestlers there, and they're all getting tickets to the draft. One of the things we wanted to do was, obviously we don't have the budget of the NFL, but we wanted to make it like sort of an NFL style draft with lots of excitement, fans there, We'll get some guys shirts off, chest painted, with team names, and giving out merch. Because the fans don't know the teams yet, right? They don't know who their favorite team is. But if they want free merch, we'll they're gonna have to root for the team that they get. But there'll be a stage. We'll have hopefully all the first round draft picks there to come out and hold up their jersey and get their hat, and hundreds and hundreds of kids and family, in a very exciting atmosphere. Shane Sparks is going to be part of it with us. And the guys at BEG Wrestling are going to be sort of the commentators, sort of the Mel Kiper type guy in between picks. So we're hoping it's a really exciting thing. There's 6 general managers. Caden Henschel is the manager of the Cradle City Cicadas, and they will draft their teams. The wrestlers are registering now, and we have about 150 wrestlers register so far. There's 6 teams and there's 7 weight classes. So there's basically 42 starting positions. And so we're looking for the best, 42 guys. We're probably expecting 250, 300, maybe 400 registrants by the time it's all done, because the draft registration goes till June 30th. So everybody registers for the draft. The 6 general managers will draft them. It's kind of like a fantasy football draft. They don't pay them or worry about compensation. The league does all that. So it really is kind of like a fantasy football team. They could make trades. If somebody gets injured, they'll have to pick up somebody off waivers. Our whole system of not as much for the initial draft, it's pretty straightforward, but how we manage free agency in the off season in years 2 and beyond is super cool. We just come up with this really innovative approach. It's kind of like the NFL salary cap, except way simpler for fans to understand. But that's not initially. July 21st is the draft. They'll have their teams, and then the season will be in the fall. Because a lot of people hadn't heard of CLAW yet, and this was our first year. We're really trying to get the word out because we're finally launching. We decided to do sort of a quasi-modified first season, and so the 6 teams are going to be put in 2 divisions of 3. And so basically it's going to be like 2 pools of 3. You'll wrestle the other 2 teams in your division. The winner of that is going to go to our championship dual meet in Pittsburgh at the end of November. And that's called the Super Duel 1. And the two winners will do that. And the other teams will wrestle like the second place team from the other pool. The third place team in the pool will wrestle the other third place. And so there's just going to be this first year 9 dual meets total, if you do the math and all that. So 3 dual meets per team. So, and then next year we'll expand that to 5. And we're already getting inquiries from people about, starting a team or opening a franchise. So maybe we'll even move to 8 teams next year. But we wanted to start, we didn't, some of the leagues in other sports and in wrestling, start off too big, too fast. The NFL, all the major sports, how many times franchises have been shut down in certain cities because, there wasn't fan support for it. There was an owner maybe, but there wasn't fan interest. So we didn't really want to do that. Our teams are not geographically based. It's just 6 teams that we're going to work hard to brand and give them, an identity and a personality, because ultimately we want people, become fans of teams. Initially, you might support a team because you like the logo. At Vegas, every kid who came up, practically every kid's like, I'm a Cicadas fan, Caden Henschel. And so because it might be a general manager, you might want to see who they draft. And then, if your favorite wrestlers on the team, that becomes your team. Might be their colors. It might be, what happens in them. But the mascots, we already have mascots. And, sometimes the kids already like a team because, a mascot, befriends them. So strategies, to get teams to be loyal, to get fans to be loyal to teams and to brands, in addition to wrestlers. And that's what CLAW is really about, is a unique style, a new style of wrestling, CLAW style, that's faster paced and more fun to watch. And this whole league structure with the draft, free agency, fantasy leagues. We will have betting eventually, probably in year 2, and finding ways, to fall in love with the team, because wrestlers will come and go. People stay fans of teams, for the rest of their lives in many cases. This first year, just 3 dual meets per team. And then we're going to do them in early October. They're going to be all done in one weekend in State College, Pennsylvania. And then the super duel, though, will be the end of November. And it's going to be limited crowd, sort of cool looking environment, great optics with video boards and stuff, lights in State College. And then the super duel in Pittsburgh will be at UPMC Fieldhouse, Cooper Fieldhouse in downtown Pittsburgh, which was renovated a couple of years ago. It's on Duquesne University. Beautiful, beautiful facility, huge video boards right next to the PPG arena, where the Penguins play. So right downtown, and it seats about 4,000, which is about the size we wanted in year one. We didn't want a 15,000 seat arena, and have to, put curtains over the top and all kinds of empty seats. So we're working with teams and clubs and Wrestlers and Business Network in Pittsburgh, and really networking and developing relationships, so that the wrestling community in Pittsburgh supports it, and that we can fill that up, and just have a tremendous super duel event at the end of November.
Okay. Well, I'm a homer for mascots and logos when it comes to picking my professional sports team. So you mentioned the Cicadias. What are the other teams and what are the logos?
And if anybody wants to see them, they're on our website. I forget which tab, but it will be easy to find. But so Caden Henschel is the general manager of the Cradle City Cicadas. Giorgio Poulos, who's another social media influencer in the sport. He's the guy who holds the sign up, Take Me Down for $1,000. Very popular. He's the general manager for the team Chaos. Their colors are sort of dark blue and orange. Anthony Robles, who everybody knows who Anthony Robles is the general manager of the Hammers. Anthony, of course, was an NCAA champ and was just the star or feature of the movie Unstoppable, on Amazon Prime, which was #1 in the world on Amazon Prime. But his story, is so inspiring, and we're just thrilled to have somebody like him involved with CLAW, just so respected and inspirational. Billy Baldwin is the general manager of the Mat Kings, longtime wrestling advocate, movie and TV star. And Angelo Ferrari, Iowa Hawkeyes, is the general manager of the Leopards, whose colors are black and gold, which is why Angelo wanted the Leopards. But Angelo, as wrestling fans will know, was one of the top high school recruits in the country. He redshirted this year, but he wrestled in a couple matches, most notably Iowa's dual meet against Oklahoma State, where he had a huge win over a top-ranked guy. Big moment, and he's a redshirt. So he's got 4 years ahead of him, and he definitely has the potential to be a 2, 3, 4-time national champ. So we really wanted Iowa fan base, tuned into CLAW. And we have a big announcement regarding Penn State coming out soon that I just can't quite announce yet, but it's going to be huge for drawing in Penn State fans, which is another, big powerhouse, and, the dynasty right now in wrestling. And so those are the 5 general managers. So the 6th one is the team, the Enforcers, and we were holding a nationwide fan contest to pick the general manager of the Enforcers. So fans submit a 30-second video telling us why they deserve to be the general manager. And it's actually hysterical, some of the videos that you get. It's like, dude, why did you send this? But there's some really good ones too. So at the end of the month, we're going to review all the entries and award it to a fan. And that's just part of our philosophy of fans first, a fan-friendly league. Wrestling has not paid enough attention to fans over the decades. It's like they're an afterthought. It's like you come to wrestling because you're going to see wrestling. And you go to a basketball game, you go to Banana Ball, and it's a completely different experience than wrestling. And we're out to change that. Our live events, like in Pittsburgh this year, it's going to be, constant attention on the fans. How do we engage them? How do people who've never seen wrestling before have a great time and want to come back? It's more than just about what happens on the mat. It's like we have to entertain people. And that's somewhat easy to do live on a screen. that's a bigger challenge. How do you engage and entertain people? Live, a mascot can go up, and do something funny with a kid, and that kid, a little kid loves it, right? But how do you do that on screen? And so we're really trying to innovate and challenge assumptions and how broadcasts are done. And you see that constant theme in everything I say. It's about fans and it's about challenging assumptions and innovating. How can we make broadcasts more engaging? How can we bring people more into the sport who are watching for the first time? We have hundreds of new statistics and rankings, kind of taken off of baseball. Like you watch baseball and some of the statistics they have are just sort of ridiculous, right? This guy's hitting 385 on Saturday afternoons against left-handers since May 17th. And you read that and you're like, oh, what about before May 17th? And why just Saturday afternoons? But you're engaged, right? You're thinking about it. Sometimes the stats are meaningful and useful and they're great. And other times it's like, it's a stat. So we want useful, interesting stats because wrestling doesn't have many, takedowns, record, there's not much else, make bonus point wins. And there's not much else after that. So we've worked hard to come up with new stats. We're going to have a whole team during our matches accumulating stats, that can be forwarded to the broadcasting team and to the graphics team, to make it more interesting. Ranking guys different ways, new stats to measure how aggressive they are, like attack rate. How many times does a guy shoot? How many times does he get a good, and how many of them are quality shots? We're coming up with metrics for all these things. So as you can see, I never thought it would take us 3 years to launch, but there's so much to do, in creating a product, that actually has a chance that, it's not something you just do on a whim and say, we're going to have a card, we're going to get some great wrestlers and throw matches. I mean, it's doubtful that that's sustainable. You got to cover every base. And we haven't even talked about marketing strategies and distribution and, all the other things that go into a successful business.
Well, you bring up that distribution, and I am curious that with the interactive broadcasts, what is the plan for TV? You going on Fight Pass? You're going to start on YouTube, and are there going to be video packages? Do you plan on highlighting individual stories or just the teams?
So we're going to have a OTT platform, like a fast TV channel called a CLAW Total Access. And that will be kind of our main media hub. If you want every match, every dual meet in real time, and then a lot of other premium content, all the press conferences beforehand, press conferences is after, behind the scenes stuff. We'll take you in the locker room where the teams are talking about the match or pep talk. You'll come out of the tunnel with them. You'll be on the bus with them when they're coming to the facility. We'll have commentary from the athletes after the fact, breaking down their matches, technique stuff, all kinds of premium content. And that's going to be called CLAW Total Access. And you can access that. Anybody who has a smart TV, through like Samsung TV, Roku, Fire Stick, all those options. You'll be able to get the app and watch all that. And CLAW Total Access in the first year is going to be like $2 a month, sort of a first year special. But taking you into the league, like, CLAW Total Access. We will also, so that's it. So that's there. You can also watch some of the matches pay-per-view. But we also know that if people have to pay, you're going to lose a lot of potential customers, right? There's just lots of people. And our audience so far is like really young because we have a big social media strategy. Just since we started trying to grow social media, really, since the NCAA championships in Philadelphia, which was the end of March, we've gone from 3 to 24,000 on Instagram, which is still small. We have much bigger goals, but percentage wise in 7 weeks, that's great growth. And it's all young people. So we know they're not all going to want to, even though it's $24, they're not going to want to pay for that. So on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night during the season, we'll have Tuesday Night Wrestling, and it will be free on CLAW Total Access. It will also be streamed on like X and YouTube, and hopefully Flow. We're negotiating with them or talking to them right now. Anything that we put out for free will also go out on Flow. to connect with that audience. And then spending a lot of time, really the last 2 weeks, exploring partnerships with different of these fast TV channels, mainly in the MMA world. So there's a lot of channels out there, like the Freevee, Fubo, all that type of stuff. There's ones that specialize in MMA. We already have a syndication agreement with a company who will distribute it out to different channels. And then we're trying to get sort of a bigger platform on some of the bigger ones right now. And all that does is it's free, but it will allow different people to see it. And if they promote it to their audiences, then more people will be coming familiar with CLAW. So we'll have our own marketing strategies to get people to come to CLAW Total Access. But if it's on all these other platforms, different people that we wouldn't have reached, will hopefully see it. And you know how those channels are. There's zillions of them now. And so if nobody promotes it on those channels, somebody might stumble across it. But we really need partners, that will help promote it. They put it at the top of the page. They do promotions for CLAW and other MMA things that they're doing. There's a lot of different ways to drive traffic, and that's what everybody's trying to do. But every Tuesday night free, then every Wednesday night, we'll have Wednesday night wrestling, and same time every Tuesday night. So everybody knows that's one of the problems with wrestling is freestyle wrestling is really hard to follow and know when matches are on. And sometimes it's different time zones too. And you usually have to have flow. And even college wrestling, it's the schedule. The schedules aren't consistent, which means stats aren't consistent. There's D1 schools that wrestle lower tier D1 schools, and then there's Big Ten D1 schools, and their schedules are very different. The competition level is very different. But when they give out awards at the end of the year, it doesn't account for that. So a consistent schedule that's easy to follow. Everybody knows when the matches are on, and every match matters. In our system, you got to win the match to make the playoffs. You win more dual meets, you'll be a higher seed. Now, this first year is a little different because we're just doing the two teams, going to the championship. But normally, there'll be wild cards, and so you got to score as many points as you can for your team so that your teams win, and then you'll make the playoffs. You'll have a higher seed in the playoffs. Very similar, to the NFL, to other of the big professional sports leagues. But that's so every match matters. Every dual meet matters, right? There's only going to be 5 of them next year, so you can't have guys sitting. Like, this is a problem in college wrestling, right? These guys sit so much for whatever reason. They're ducking somebody. They don't feel 100%, so they don't wrestle. Fans come to see their favorite wrestler and they're not even wrestling. And we wonder why we can't grow the sport, right? Well, the coaches aren't paid to grow the sport, right? They're paid to win, so you have to have a for-profit entity who cares. I mean, we have to make money so that we can, if you're making money, you'll invest in the sport, you'll grow the sport, and then you can reinvest in the sport and market more and give back to the sport. But you have to have a financially viable, commercially viable product if that's going to be. So the matches have to matter. You can't have guys sitting just because they want to duck somebody or something. We'll give bonuses based on, different awards, like who has the most takedowns, who scores the most points for their teams, who do the fans vote as the most exciting wrestler. And so there's all these incentives to compete hard. I think I got off. I think I digressed. Whatever your question was, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Jim,
what was your question again?
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, did you have a question, Rich? Because I saw you.
I was just going to say, that question mark with the Enforcers logo is really growing on me. I think we might have to dust off the Rock the Promo stuff, and maybe we could have a brother tandem general managers for the Enforcers.
There you go.
You don't want the Airey bros in the corner with Hawaiian shirts on and their blue blockers.
Tom, I'm curious. You mentioned the up to, I think, 300 people eligible for the draft or entering the draft. Who is eligible? Are we going to see? Are we going to see maybe some high school kids like Bo Bassett or Jax Forrest? Is there college NCAA athletes eligible, or is it going to be postgraduates?
Anybody 18 or older is eligible. we'd love to have, especially since they have one more year of high school. Uh, Bo Bassett and Jax Forrest had some, some other really good ones. But for the most part, it's senior level
Okay.
guys. Uh, our season overlaps with the college season a little bit. And so we don't think if somebody's eligible and wrestling and competing that year, a lot of coaches, especially the bigger name guys, they're getting a lot of NIL money. Their coaches aren't going to let them, be doing this in their season. But if they're redshirting, maybe. So we're hoping to get some college guys, and the high school guys definitely could do it. And then, but for the most part, it's senior level guys.
Okay.
And so far, I mean, we've gotten really impressive guys registering. Lots of NCAA All-Americans, D1, D2, and D3. A lot of D1 guys. Lots of D1 NCAA qualifiers and guys that were, reputable starters, for some of the best programs in the country. And athletes are still hearing about it. We did have a big presence at the US Open, which was huge, talking to athletes, but not everybody's there. So we're still getting the word out, meeting with coaches, spreading the word. But I think we're going to have, when it's all said and done, 6 teams of pretty stacked wrestlers, high quality, high level wrestling. And, that's exciting. If there's good guys that don't get drafted, that's, we feel bad for them, but, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great for the league.
Well, you mentioned being at the US Open. Rich, you know who I'm thinking?
Who?
Zane Lanham.
Oh yeah, Zane would be great.
Yeah, and a two-time NAIA champ. We had him on the podcast. He actually tried out for WWE last year, but I believe he got third at the US Open. I think he would be a
Yeah.
great fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many guys like that, and D2 and D3 guys, and guys who they're not competing actively anymore. They're not wrestling in the US Open, but they're coaching in a room. They're training. They're in shape. They were great college wrestlers, and it's terrible that there's not more opportunities after these guys graduate from college, and even the guys that you want to see, and they keep wrestling and they try to make world teams and stuff. A lot of people don't like freestyle, and we talked about situational diversity. Freestyle's largely, I know there's parterre, but it's largely a takedown tournament. And so you lose some of those different positions and different interesting things that can happen in folk style. And there's some guys that are just really good on top, right? Like you remember, well, you guys are Jersey guys, but some of I'm a Penn Stater, so Zane Rutherford, Jason Nolf, Bo Nickel, Logan Stever at Ohio State. There's other guys, more recent, Ridge Lovett this year, guys that are really good on top. And then they go wrestle freestyle. And it's like, I don't want to see him shoot a single leg. I want to see him turn people and pin people and legs and cradles. And, and maybe that's just me, but I know like what makes those guys special is, you put them in a takedown tournament and they're not a whole lot different, than other guys, but on top it's must see TV.
Yeah.
And so, so there's guys out there like that aren't wrestling freestyle. They never really wanted to wrestle freestyle, or maybe they moved on to their careers, but they're still coaching and training. There's lots of guys like that. And, some names and blast from the past, I think we'll come up with some guys that have registered and you'll say, oh yeah, I remember him. He was really good. Haven't heard his name in 5 years, but he's still in shape. And so that would be kind of cool for some of those guys to, come back onto the mat. Some of them who thought they were done wrestling, competitively forever now have a chance again.
Well, I'm excited for the draft.
Yeah, me too. And you mentioned you have to make money from this, and I saw you have a pretty cool investor plan for the fans to kind of get involved on that part. Can you go into that a little bit?
We have something called the Founders Club. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes, sir.
And it's an opportunity. It's not really an investment, but it's a way to support the league and then get some rewards and get some benefits from doing so. You'll always be able to say you were a founder. Hopefully, 50 years from now, 70 years from now, the young kids will be saying, when I was a little boy, I was there. And I was a founder, I was a founding member of CLAW. I helped launch it. So people can donate $50. They can donate. We've had people donate 50. We've had people donate 250. People donate 1,000. It's different for every person, and there's different reward levels, for each level. But it's really encouraging, people that we don't know and they don't know us, but they've taken the time to learn about CLAW and embrace our vision. And maybe they're watching, a podcast like this and they think this sounds really cool, and they want to help out because the money helps us get better athletes. We want to pay athletes. We deserve these great athletes, hardworking athletes, maybe the hardest working athletes deserve a chance to wrestle professionally and to continue to do that as long as they can. And so every little bit helps, especially in the beginning, because we are doing investment funding and fundraising, and we're still doing that and still raising money. And in the short term, these contributions from people, that, like I said, we don't know, really helps. And it's really cool, when fans that we don't know send us letters or emails and want to support. And then, we'll send them, depending on your level, you get, different prizes and rewards and stuff. So yeah, if people wanted to check that out, that would be awesome. There's a tab on our website at the top called Founders Club, and everything's explained on there.
Well, I got one last one for you before we get into the final four. If Rich doesn't have anything. So you've been building this up for 3 years, and obviously you're kind of doing a hybrid style. And a couple of weeks ago, Real American Freestyle Wrestling came out with some heavy hitters behind it. I'm just curious to your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, we're always happy that wrestlers can get paid, similar to what I just said. And I'm hoping that if they can grow the audience of wrestling, that it helps us too. More fans coming into the sport. There's no reason why we can't both coexist and be successful. Now, I mean, honestly, their business plan and what they're doing is something that we wouldn't have done. That's kind of the tried approach that's been tried before, kind of like what I was saying earlier. And that's probably not something I would invest in. But man, if they can make it work, that's awesome. As long as we don't step on each other's toes. We're very, there's other efforts out there. It's like, let's work together. It's hard to launch a professional league. Wrestling has never done it. So there's no reason to step on each other's toes, especially in this case, because they're doing freestyle matches and we're doing claw style. But it's a very different product. And they're doing sort of cards, from what I understand, sort of UFC style, with rankings and belts. And we're doing a league with the draft and teams and free agency. So very different. There's no reason why they both can't exist. And fans can follow both and fans can enjoy both. So that's what we would like to happen. Wrestlers aren't always known for wanting to play in the same sandbox, so to speak. And, so we've reached out to them with no response. And, there's, I don't know what they're thinking, and I don't want to say anything negative, but we hope that we feel confident about our plans and our team. I mean, we have an incredible team of great business people, sports media people. Our advisory board is unbelievable and great reputations. And we're confident, that our plan has a chance to be sustainable, commercially viable and sustainable for a long time. Because we've been, as you could tell in this podcast, we've done a lot of work and we've tried to research and test and cover everything that needs to be tested to launch a professional league. And so, yeah, we wish them well. We hope they don't step on our toes. We don't want to step on theirs. And, there is some competition for athletes, but CLAW is really about, it's this new style of wrestling and this new format with a league. And just a very different approach. So some people have argued we don't need big names because it's about our product and what we're offering. But that said, it's good to have big names, and we will have big names too. But so that's how we feel about that group.
Good answer. Good answer. I like it.
Yeah.
Rich, you got anything else for Tom?
No, I mean, I'm really excited for everything. I appreciate you coming on to break it down for us. I'm going to dig more into some things and check out the new rule set and the scoring and all that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, anything that is out there to help grow the sport, promote the sport, and gives post-collegiate athletes an opportunity to continue their passion and their love and make some money off of what they're doing. I think it's a great thing. So I'm all for it. And I'm partial to the Hammers. I think Anthony Robles has got a great story and everything, but I keep looking at that question mark, Jim. I think we need to get the cameras out and put together a promo piece before the end of the month. We got a couple more days, so
Hey, give
Yeah.
us a reason to show up at Harris, right, Rich?
that's right. That's and that would be another thing. I don't know if it's ever been on the radar or anything, but the New Jersey State tournament is at Boardwalk Hall. That is an unbelievable venue. So if we could see a CLAW event there at some point, I think that would be amazing. Jersey fans are very passionate about the sport of wrestling, so not as Pennsylvania fans are as well too.
Well, I will say I moved. I was at Louisville at the World Team Challenge tournament this past weekend, and I was talking to the director of tourism from Louisville, and he said everybody I know from Pennsylvania is really proud of their state. And I said, really? I've never heard that before. I lived in Pennsylvania a long time, and I said maybe it's. And then I moved to Virginia, and it's not that people aren't proud, but it's always like Jersey people are proud of Jersey, and now I'm in Texas, and Texas people are proud of Texas.
Absolutely.
And I think so. There's like Jersey and Texas have the most pride, and so we know we want to have. Eventually, we'll have franchises in different locales, and Jersey would be a great area because of the passion there.
Yeah.
So hopefully, that happens. It could be. Actually, it could be. Well, I shouldn't give a date, but it could happen sooner than we were originally thinking, because people are hearing about this and they're like, we want a team in our area. So it will be interesting to see how all that develops. But would love to be in Jersey, and we'll definitely be marketing in Jersey. We have extensive marketing plans, to get out there and make sure wrestlers know about this, because most wrestlers don't watch college wrestling now. You can just look at the viewership numbers, and they don't watch it. And so we got to change that. Kids that are wrestling need a professional sport that they can easily follow and watch and absorb in short form content and, all that.
I think it was the XFL. It was the Jersey Hitmen. I think that would make a great mascot and a logo. Piggyback off the Sopranos lore.
Yeah, there you go. Final four, Rich?
Let's do it.
All right, Tom, first one I got for you. Are you a coffee drinker?
No, Diet Coke.
All right.
Okay. In the morning too?
Yeah, all day.
All right.
Trying to break the habit.
Okay. Tom, do you have any daily practices or rituals you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Tom Houck?
I try to stay in shape. Try to work out every day if I can. And I had mentioned earlier that I went to seminary and I got a master's in theology. And so, I try to have time for prayer and Bible study, not as much as I should, but those are two things, and then time for the family. But nothing particularly unique or interesting or exciting there, I guess.
Well, I mean, now you get your own built-in sauna where you live, so you'll kill two birds with one stone with your workout and the sauna.
Yep.
Tom, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Okay, since I was a little boy, I was a huge Elton John fan, and Elton John's 78 years old now. But he just came out with a new album with the Brandy Carlisle, who I didn't know, but she won a bunch of Grammys. And it's actually Elton John's best album in decades. High energy, he's rocking. He was on Saturday Night Live a couple of weeks ago doing one of the songs, and it's like, wow, he's 78 and still going strong. So I'm a huge Elton John fan. He has so much material over the years that I think my playlist of Elton John songs, is like 27 hours or something. So I can listen to a different song. So for me, it's always been about Elton John. I played the piano when I was a kid and, still play the piano. So as a male growing up in the 1970s, you had to be an Elton John fan, and then Billy Joel after that. But it's incredible how he's still remained somewhat relevant. This album was #1 in the UK. I don't know how it's done in the US, but anyway, books. I'm really reading business books again. When I was in the business world, I read everything and 10 magazines a week and every hot business book. When I went into ministry, I kind of lost my passion for business. When I ran top of the podium, it was a small rest in the scheme of things. It wasn't a big business thing. It was more just running a wrestling facility. But with CLAW, really my passion for business, which I always had when I was young, has come back. And I just finished for the second time Steve Jobs' biography. And I read about Amazon and Netflix and anything that we can learn. I'm big on reading and learning from other sports, other businesses, and figuring out how that applies, to what we're doing at CLAW. And that's something always I've kind of been good at. I'll read a book on Apple computer and come home with like 50 ideas for CLAW. And some of them, will get discarded, of course. Most of them will, but if there's a couple good ideas in there, it was worth it.
Do you have a favorite business recommendation, a book for someone looking to get into a startup or is doing some things and wants to take it to the next level?
Oh, man. I always like reading biographies and sort of my classic one. So I just read the Bob Iger autobiography, who's the chairman of Disney. And that was very interesting. And that has a lot of good business lessons. That I heard that on a podcast that was recommended. And that was very interesting. And Disney has a history with Apple. And that's why I'm like, I need to read the Steve Jobs book again. And I was just going to read about the Disney partnership, but I kind of ended up reading the whole thing because Jobs was such a, his the way he treated people isn't how I would do it. But, his bold thinking and innovative thinking and willingness to make big bets and not overanalyze everything to death. Obviously, you got to do your homework and due diligence and research. But some people are paralyzed by that, right? They do that forever. And you got to be able to make decisions and get on to the next thing. So I think the Bob Iger book, which is pretty recent, is really good. The Steve Jobs book, on everything that from the Apple and Macintosh to Pixar and, to Apple again with the iPhone and iPod and iPhone and everything is very interesting. And I was always a huge fan of Jack Welch, who this was back to my previous business days, but was the chairman of General Electric back like in the 80s and 90s and sort of a legendary business leader. And I just loved his principles and philosophies, had a huge impact, on me personally in my business career. And so that's kind of retro, old school, I guess. But, I'll probably read the Jack Welch book again next, his biography. And so those are just some, but I like reading about people and, I find I like hearing their story and the struggles that they overcame and, how they went from nothing, to something.
Okay, thank you. Tom, last one we got for you is a lighthearted one to close it out. We know you're a Pennsylvania guy, so maybe you're missing your scrapple. You're down in Texas now, so maybe you're into barbecue. Maybe it's a beverage. Do you have a guilty pleasure?
Again, nothing exciting. I eat ice cream every night. I have to have ice cream. And that's really it. I don't drink. I haven't. In fact, I'm going on 30-year anniversary of never having a sip of alcohol, which I'm proud of. I probably did too much of that when I was young. So maybe the guilty pleasure is Diet Coke. That's Coke. Like my one vice that I need to break habit of. But yeah, nothing too exciting there. Kind of boring person.
Not at all. What kind of ice cream you dabble in? You like Ben and Jerry's? You find something new down there in Texas?
Yeah, down here it's called Bluebell, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh yeah.
I think it's Bluebell.
Yep.
But yeah, and my wife brings home different flavors. Nothing interesting. I'm an idea person. My personal. Otherwise, I'm kind of bored.
Okay. Hey. Is it just straight ice cream? You do a little chocolate syrup or anything?
Depends.
Okay.
Chocolate syrup, whipped cream, cherries. You gotta have the cherries sometime. Kind of make it like a little sundae.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you for joining the Airey Bros tonight. I greatly enjoyed this conversation, and I can't wait to see what's going on with Claw. And hopefully, we'll check back in once the season gets underway.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Great questions. Enjoyed talking with you, and thank you again.
Thank you, Tom. We do appreciate you filling us in on everything you got going on with Claw, the rules, the uniforms, the general managers, the athletes, the teams, the season, everything. It's exciting and it's good for the sport, and we're definitely looking forward to the draft and everything you got going on and coming up in October as well. So we'll be tuned in, and hopefully we'll get you some that Airy Bros bump, and we'll get you some new fans.
All right. Thank you again.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Tom Houck from Claw Wrestling. Make sure you stay tuned. Tune into the draft in July and stay in tune for the season coming up in October and get excited for some of the changes and the excitement that they're bringing to wrestling. That is it for us this week. We greatly appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back next week. We're going to be going belly to belly again. We're going to be talking some Division III wrestling in New Jersey, and we're going to be back on the mat as well on Wednesday for some New Jersey high school wrestling. We're going back to Region 6. We'll keep you in the lurch a little bit, surprise you with who we got, but we're excited for it. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and